Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. I'm your host, James Maskell, and we are in the physician weekend. We're in the sort of medical conference part of the Evolution of Medicine Summit. And today we're talking about non-clinical factors, and we're really talking about the evolution of medicine as it pertains to physicians. And so one of the most interesting people that I've met on my journey through this is Tom Blue. And Tom is the Chief Strategy Officer for the American Association of Private Physicians. And it's so great to have you on the summit today. Thanks so much for making time to be here, Tom.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
So, Tom, last year I had the opportunity to read your paper on the third era of medicine. You described sort of the first two eras and then us moving into this third era of medicine. And for me, it really struck a chord because it was sort of the closest thing that I'd read out in the world about what I saw as, you know, the evolution of medicine that we've sort of been describing all the way through this. And I just thought that might be a good place to start. So, you know, for those people who are unfamiliar with your paper, maybe you could just, start by sharing this, your thoughts on the two eras that we've had and this third era of medicine and its importance in the evolution of medicine.
A good stepping off point for understanding this, James, is we hear year after year after year, and I think the Commonwealth Fund just came out recently with its latest set of appalling numbers about the United States spending multiples of any other industrialized country on medicine and yet getting so little in return. And, by most every measure, we come in first in spending and almost dead last in terms of most measures of quality and health outcomes. And it begs the question of how this could be possible, because it seems to defy logic and reason. And, if you think about it, and it's just been something that's been a preoccupation of mine, like I'm sure it is for a lot of people for a long time. If you think about how medicine has evolved from sort of a high-level perspective over the course of time, what you see is that from kind of the dawn of time when people began thinking about matters of health until really only relatively recently, the preoccupation of people in healthcare and medicine was an epic battle with infectious disease. It was the biggest killer of people. It was ending people's lives tragically early on, and generation after generation, infection could take someone, from a state of vibrancy and health to the grave in a matter of days or weeks. And so it made perfect sense that would be the focal point for all of our health scientists to think about how to win that war. And so finally, after generations of fighting it, essentially with the invention of a pill, we were able to make an incredible victory against the war on infectious disease. And so the governing wisdom that took us to that place was that as Louis Pasteur said, if we could find a way to intervene in the interaction between certain microbes and bacteria, that we could sort of win the victory for health. And it certainly appeared to be true. And it was such a big victory that it etched into our collective medical minds, both as individual consumers of healthcare as well as providers of it, that health, that the restoration of health was about finding the vulnerability of the bug and designing an intervention, a magic bullet to kill it. And if we could only do that, then it would solve our various health problems. So by implication, our assumption was that all things that are health problems either are or behave as bugs that invade us, and we've got to cast them out somehow. And so we kind of carried that thinking into what I had called the second era of medicine, where I think we live today but are winding down, where we're carrying our cast out the bug mentality into this second era, but we've shifted our focus from infectious disease to the next layer of things that kill us. Things like, heart attacks, strokes, cancers, diabetes, things that today, we would look at as and describe as chronic illness. And what we found is that these, the magic bullet mentality is simply not serving us well. I mean, we've built an enormous industry around fashioning magical interventions to cast out the demons of disease. But what we've discovered is that the more we spend, we don't seem to be getting the return on it. And what we have found over the course of this time, and it's introduced a real challenge as far as the evolution of medicine is concerned, is that not only have we developed around healthcare our largest industry in this country by far, but the profession of medicine has evolved. It has grown. And so we added a layer to our strategy in the second era of medicine. So it's not just a matter of finding the bug and killing it, but with all these physicians, we've divided our ranks up and divided them along the lines of organ systems. So, you take the heart, another person will take kidneys, someone else will take the lungs, I'll take the liver. And that seemed to make great sense when we devised this divide and conquer strategy, because a heart attack appeared to be a problem of the heart. A stroke appeared to be a problem of the brain. Well, what we found today in the light of current medical understanding is that these things that once appeared to be discrete, geographically isolated events, like a heart attack, are in fact just the downstream manifestation of systemic-wide disease. And so, disease and dysfunction. And so what we've learned is today we sit at a place where our understanding clearly reveals that our strategy of divide and conquer and magic bullets don't work, but we're deeply entrenched. As oftentimes I'll say, we're sort of trapped at the collision of moral and fiduciary obligation. We have this massive industry that is fiduciarily obligated to continue to try and maximize profits for its investors. Yet morally, science has sort of revealed that the underlying strategy for creating, restoring, maintaining, and growing and protecting health in this country is unfortunately outdated. And so we're pinned at this unfortunate intersection. So I contend that we are about to enter into what is the third era of medicine, which from a medical perspective, quite simply, is a recognition that the most cost-effective and efficient and morally appropriate way of approaching matters of health and disease are by way of the underlying cause, which is why we've become such incredible advocates for the functional medicine movement, where the sort of timeless wisdom that infinitely varied in its effects, nature is simple only in its causes. And these very small number of root causes actually are creating a great many effects that are costing us a fortune as a country and causing people to sort of suffer as they try and battle with symptoms and suppression of symptoms over long periods of time. So in the third era of medicine, the role of the physician and the healthcare provider will evolve from quickly identifying and fashioning a symptom suppression strategy or set of tactics to first understanding and doing the necessary investigative work to find the underlying cause, and then devising more global strategies for addressing health matters at the level of the cause rather than the effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. So, it seems like what are the main factors that are sort of contributing to this sort of drag or lag of keeping us in this the second era and not moving us to the third? Because it makes perfect sense fiscally, morally. I'm almost surprised that it's taken businesses and other organizations that are paying these costs so long to work this out. But it seems like this isn't going away. But there are certainly hooks of the second era that are not letting go.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And the two big hooks that are, I think are really, really difficult for us to overcome, although we finally, I believe, are overcoming them, are, number one, we're talking about our largest industry. I mean, the cardiovascular disease industry itself is in the ballpark of a $500 billion a year industry. So the downstream economy that flows from a person surviving a heart attack is $750,000 to $1 million in cost, which is revenue in the healthcare industry. It is, it's a very disruptive thought that a primary care doctor, armed with a slightly different a radically different operating system for managing that risk, could have a material impact on eradicating heart attacks and strokes. So on the one hand, from a moral imperative, it's an incredible victory. Yet on the other hand, from a business perspective in the cardiovascular industry, it's quite scary. And so it's a great little kind of way to observe this unfortunate phenomenon at work. I think is in the realm of cardiovascular. because we are, we're so far beyond the days of thinking that we're going to manage cardiovascular risk by following and managing good and bad cholesterol. Yet we're continually bombarded with advertising that we should trust our hearts to Lipitor. And so, there's a massive media campaign, that convinces us that we should manage our health one way, and it's a lot of money being spent creating a lot of impression on on consumers, and then at the same time we have science unfolding in front of us that tell us that we should do things differently, and so you have this collision of moral and fiduciary obligation. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the evolution of medicine is also disruptive to the structure and the power structure of the medical institution itself. So, when you begin to view matters of health and health restoration at the root cause level and at the systemic level, the boundaries that define medical specialization, become very fuzzy. So, for example, take an inflammatory condition like rheumatoid arthritis. Well, there's growing understanding that in many instances, something like rheumatoid arthritis actually originates from dysfunction in the gut. So, whose job does it become then to manage, prevent, reverse rheumatoid arthritis? And so you can see where it causes collisions between medical specialties, which can be uncomfortable and requires a lot of adjustment.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you perfectly articulated exactly why it's not moving forward and why it has to move forward. So, this sort of brings us into a situation where we're looking at maybe this third area, which is the physician themselves, because physicians have had either a good time of it or a bad time of it, depending on, sort of how you look at it in this last era. What do you think the prospects are for physicians, both sort of primary care and sort of generalists and specialties in this third era of medicine?
I think particularly among primary care physicians, I think we're probably soon to see a real kind of revitalization of that particular group within the physician population. Both in terms of just the growth in the number of primary care doctors as the third era of medicine evolves. And also in the way that they are, respected, compensated in the healthcare system, et cetera. There's a growing realization, I think, and you really see this pointedly among self-insured employers, that the greatest lever in terms of managing health actually is to really partner at the primary care level with physicians who are enlightened in this way. And, it's funny the way our healthcare industry has evolved. We have gone to great lengths to accelerate the way that primary care physicians have to work. Work faster, extend yourself, manage legions of nurse practitioners and physician assistants, and go faster, either to identify and classify a disease and quickly, prescribe an intervention, or to escalate it and refer it on to a specialist. So we're accelerating primary care, to 5, 6, 7-minute visits, so that you can more quickly refer them on to a 30-minute visit with a specialist at 6 times the cost. And so common sense is telling payers, and by that I mean employers, probably the government, and certainly individuals, that you're a heck of a lot smarter to spend that 30 minutes at the primary care level and allow that doctor to do the investigation required to find the cause of your problem than to rush off to a specialist at 6 times the cost. And so, some of the things that are bringing about this change, which are really, I think are the makings of something very exciting, is number one, we've been at this wellness thing at the employer level for long enough where there are a good many companies now that have proven that there's an enormous return on investment to be had from investing in health. And so, clear examples of that are companies like Safeway, who, now years after their commitment to managing health among their workforce, you can see that the economic impact of flattening their healthcare inflation curve while others in their industry have not, as years have gone by and that gap has widened. What you're finding is employers are spending today on average about $16,000-ish per employee per year on healthcare.
Wow.
Best practices, companies like Safeway have demonstrated that best practices are more in the $8,000 to $10,000 per employee per year range. And so that $6,000 to $8,000 per employee per year is a big enough and a well-proven enough nut to have captivated the attention of the entire employer population. And so what you see is the resulting kind of macro trend is you see a macro trend towards self-insuring. So why? Companies are self-insuring because if they're going to manage health, if they're going to invest in managing health, they have to be self-insured to a large extent in order to capture the return on that investment. And so when you see smaller and smaller companies under 100 employees devising strategies to self-insure, what that signifies very clearly is that there's a recognition that in order to manage healthcare costs, you have to manage health. That seems an obvious revelation.
Yep.
Healthier people have fewer health claims. And if you're going to make that investment, you've got to create structures that enable you to capture that value. And so, as you kind of walk down the strategies that are being employed by the most innovative employers that are now seeking to extract that return from better management of health, think about it. You save $8,000 per employee per year. Where does that money go? Straight to the bottom line of the company.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Massive changes in valuation. It becomes a strategic issue for a company. And as soon as that happens, you have a payer revolution on your hands. And I think that's actually what we're seeing is a legitimate payer revolution where the real payers for healthcare, led by employers, certainly the government as well, and individuals who are now on high deductible health plans and are becoming much more and more savvy healthcare consumers all the time, are seeking out real value for themselves. And the free market force, I think, will radically accelerate the evolution of medicine in this direction.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It's one of the reasons why I've chosen to do what I'm doing here in America, because you don't have those same forces at play in the UK where I grew up. You have you're sort of constantly fighting against this free payer system where, it stifles the innovation. I mean, would you say with just the things that we're seeing with like the Cleveland Clinic taking on functional medicine and looking at that, and with this, Safeway and examples like that, are we past the point of no return now?
I think we absolutely are past the point of no return. I mean, when the opportunity for return is as great as it clearly is today from the perspective of an employer, and as the global economy continues to only become more competitive, those numbers, $8,000 per employee per year, add up and make an enormous difference as to the ability of American companies to compete globally. Companies are going to innovate in the same around healthcare in the same way that they've innovated around production and lean processes to shave out cost and waste in other business functions. And I think healthcare is finally moving into the crosshairs of corporate innovation. And we'll see not only a lot of technological and process innovation, but innovation around the way that particularly the primary care supply chain works, and how physicians and medical practices are compensated for their work and for the results that they achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think will be the reaction of those vested interests right now that have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profits, but are probably, if all of this downstream value from these heart attacks that are stopped further upstream, what do you think will be their sort of reaction? Do you think they're going to just sort of put their fingers in their ears and just hope that it's not happening, or do you think they'll be sort of coming along for the ride?
That's actually a really interesting question, because what we're clearly witnessing is a seismic shift in our largest industry. And certainly we have seen examples of significant industries that have undergone, seismic shifts, mostly in light of the internet age, the information age. And, it seems like the pattern that players in the marketplace have when these things happen is that you have, at first a resistance to it. I'd rather not think about it. I'd rather pretend this change isn't happening. Then the evidence becomes compelling enough for the smartest of the bunch to say, listen, we're not going to beat this trend. So rather than having it roll over top of us, let's be the first to innovate and change. And then you have sort of the secondary innovators following those leaders, and then there are always the people who, like you just said, are going to put their fingers in their ears, bury their head in the sand, and simply wait for disaster. And I think they'll be weeded out of the corporate gene pool, so to speak, over the course of time. And I think what we're seeing is, you mentioned the Cleveland Clinic a moment ago. My interpretation of what's happening there is here's an institution that is unquestionably, at least in my mind, the biggest large healthcare innovator and the most visionary of the large health systems, from an innovation perspective. And you see evidence of this not only in the way that they've evolved to manage health in their own workforce, but the way that they have created such an incredible culture and quality base and analytics to measure their quality as an institution. And so now you see, okay, well, how do you interpret their interest in creating a functional medicine center right there in the heart of their campus? And I can only imagine that this is evidence that the most visionary of the American healthcare institutions has decided to lead the change, as painful as it probably will be if it takes root, rather than simply be dragged into it.
Yeah, they're going to do hopefully a lot fewer heart stents, but it may mean that they'll get better outcomes, right?
Exactly, and you have to recognize, and I'm sure that they have, that if that's the case, it's probably short term. It's a short term pain and painful disruption to be followed by what will be long term dramatic differentiation from everyone else in the system.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a brilliant move by them, and it and of course it's a fantastic kind of vote of confidence for the functional medicine movement.
I really love the quote that you had in your paper by Eric Hoffer. It says, "In a time of drastic change, it is the learners who inherit the future. The learned usually find themselves equipped to live in a world that no longer exists." And it couldn't be more clear with heart attacks and heart health, in that if you don't have build up of plaque and you don't have these big upstream factors that are causing heart attacks, then you don't end up needing as many heart stents, and that's probably a good thing. And that's this new world that hopefully we'll be living in.
That's exactly right. There's a real I don't know, maybe misunderstanding of medicine as being a somewhat static profession in terms of the knowledge base that governs it. But I can't remember where I heard this, but as I understand, the half-life of medical information is in the 3 to 5 year range, and so so medicine is a learning profession, and one of the consequences of making doctors work so fast and sweat on the treadmill of our incentive structures and systems is that it compromises their ability to learn and stay current. And one of the things I most admire about what I believe will prove to be the heroes of the third era of medicine, which are these doctors who today, despite every contrary exertion by the system to keep them working faster and faster and faster, and manipulating the way they get compensated so that they work faster and faster and faster, despite all of that, you've got this growing, inspiring tribe of doctors that are investing their own time, their own money, going to conferences at the Institute for Functional Medicine, and learning this new operating system for managing health, and doing it ahead of any clear profit incentive, because it's simply the right thing to do. And once they learn it, then they struggle until they find a way to bring it to their community. Yeah. And we are witnessing the birth of a very inspiring, I think, heroic group of physicians that are visionary and leading this change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and it's definitely inspiring, and it's certainly led, since I really got into it and saw what was happening, it's certainly driven a lot of my desire to be part of it and to help to accelerate it. So, Tom, you have an audience now of health of doctors. Some people on here probably health enthusiasts too, who are more interested in the politics and economics of where healthcare is going. But you're really speaking to to doctors, and I'm sure some doctors who are sort of right on board with what you're saying, and some doctors who realize that they're not maybe in a position to evolve in the way that they'd like to. What would you say if you're speaking to physicians right now and just saying, what are the options for them to participate in this evolution of medicine? Given, some might be in an employed position, some might own their own practice, be in private medicine. What are the options available to them to start to deliver this new type of medicine and get ahead of the curve?
Well, I mean, the first step, is a step in the direction of kind of reinventing oneself and one's knowledge base. So there's an education component, and as from everything I can tell, you're kind of navigating and exploring this this realm of innovation. The best source of that education comes out of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and so the first thing to do is to begin to consume that education. And the cool thing about learning functional medicine is that you don't have to complete the entire curriculum before you can start delivering profound value to patients back at home and in real life. And so it's something that pays an immediate return in terms of being able to come home and put this knowledge to work. The next thing that physicians encounter when they do this, however, is they realize that they have stepped into a very tricky situation in that they are learning and very quickly becoming morally compelled to apply a new operating system for managing health in their practice, and they're doing it ahead of the system's evolution as far as how they get paid. And so, if you think about it, we have a payment system and an incentive system that is very much built, of course, through insurance, on the idea of paying doctors to take action in response to a particular diagnosis or symptom. And so, when that's the case, and you're learning to get ahead of symptoms and diagnoses, and you're learning to question the diagnosis itself as to is a heart attack really a heart problem, or is it something else? Is arthritis really a joint problem, or is it or does the problem actually originate in the gut? Well, all of a sudden, the work that these doctors are doing, doesn't compute in the eyes of the payer system, and the time that's required for them to spend is unfortunately not well valued by the payer system. And so the challenge in front of doctors today as they make these steps is to try and figure out, how do I capture value for very important medical services that are clearly ingredients in the recipe for real health that just today aren't valued by the payer system. And this is where, this is what I've devoted the better part of my entire career to, is figuring out models and strategies for doctors to do just that. So there's an evolution of the practice business model that has to coincide with the evolution of the doctor's knowledge base in order for them to really thrive in this sort of new economy and new world of healthcare.
Yeah, so one of the things that is tantamount about functional medicine is, really listening to patients and taking time with them and so forth. And time is really something that is, time with a physician outside of them doing different procedures on you is not particularly well valued right now.
That's exactly right. This entire evolution of medicine is fueled first and foremost by the availability of time to do it. The technologies are very enabling. All of the advanced labs that we have and the new and better ways to identify dysfunction and health risk is fantastic. But in the absence of having the time, A, to learn it, and B, to apply it, it's all for naught. And so, it's something that I feel certain over the course of the next, 5 or 6 years, certainly the next decade, we're going to, the system itself will begin to rectify. But today, it represents a legitimate struggle for physicians, and who want to apply this. And so, what we've done within One Health is entirely, designed to try and create solutions to that exact problem for practices. But that's one of those unfortunate realities that that complicate things today, but are very realistic, and it's very achievable to overcome those even in today's payer environment.
Well, that's really part of the one day that I wanted to have as part of the Evolution of Medicine Summit, which was going to talk about these new business models, because what we have seen is innovation from this sort of heroic band that you spoke about. And, some are innovating by using other practitioners to do the sort of functional medicine, lifestyle coaching work. So we'll have Dr. Frank Littman talking about how he's built coaches into his model and how he uses them to spend the majority of their time at a lower price point. You've got people like Dr. Jeff Glad, who's built his own micro practice in not a very affluent part of rural Indiana, and has been able to do it by really using telemedicine well. Dr. Shilpa Saxena, who's using the concept of group visits and finding ways to spend more time in sort of more of a scaled way and still take insurance. So that there are green shoots of people innovating in this model already, and that's pretty exciting. And we probably haven't seen the end of that innovation either, have we?
Oh no, I don't think that we have at all. What will be interesting is I think we will probably begin to witness a lot of the innovation to this point has been driven by either ways to sort of manipulate and capitalize on the structure of the payer system as it exists today, or and to somehow try and achieve leverage of time inside the payer system, or innovation around how to generate revenue over here on one side of the practice, essentially to fund the physician's ability to give away time on the other side of the practice. So the most pointed example of that is the number of practices that more or less survive from the margins of supplement sales, and use those margins to then underwrite their ability to invest the time that's required with their patients on the other side of the house. And unfortunately, you would think that the payer system would really reward that behavior, trying to be innovative, around finding ways for healthcare to be delivered without actually taxing, the insurance company and payers. But oddly enough, it seems that every year, there seems to be more and more of those opportunities are shut down and closed off. Direct billing for labs and the things that these particular innovative doctors have been trying to use to enable themselves to do it. Those opportunities seem to become farther and farther, or harder and harder to find. And the good news is that as those doors are closing, the ones that are opening are driven by this payer revolution that I'm talking about, either companies that are specifically seeking out doctors that do this type of work, and growing legions of consumers that are seeking out doctors that do this kind of work. And the reason that the thing that's prodding those consumers on, it's really a very interesting thing, as more and more of us are on high deductible health plans. What's happened is that as the burden and responsibility for health financially has been shifted to the shoulders of the consumer, what you find is that consumers are starting to behave like consumers. Yeah. And they're seeking out value. And one thing that a serious and savvy healthcare consumer realizes is it's a heck of a lot easier to either address a problem at its very earliest stages or prevent it altogether than it is to wait until it's a late stage problem and deal with it at that point. And now that people are responsible for the cost burden of disease and can feel the cost or the savings reward of health, there's actually a growing consumer demand for this type of medicine. But frankly, it just resonates at a visceral level with any reasonably intelligent person. Would you rather treat the cause of the problem or the effect of the problem? And clearly, the American consumer population, given the choice, would rather treat the cause than the effect.
Absolutely. Well, that's very clear. So you've been quite a strong advocate of moving into a system that is more of a membership structure or a concierge structure for physicians. What is it about that structure that you feel holds promise? And do you feel like this is sort of like a temporary measure until the industry and the payer system catches up, or do you think this is here to stay?
That's a great question. So, if a physician is seeking to capture the value of a non-covered service, well, someone has to pay for that value. And increasingly it is, it's either the patient, him or herself, or their employer. And so if that's the case, there are, as best I can tell, about two different approaches to capturing the value. One is to continue to perpetuate the fee-for-service model and simply go to cash where you can control the pricing, which certainly makes intuitive sense. So that's probably the most intuitive approach, because we see that with lawyers and plumbers and electricians and others who simply bill for units of time on a fee-for-service basis. The challenge with that, and I really discovered this, it kind of smacked me in the face. I can remember one time when I was visiting a practice up in Northern California, and I was walking out of this guy's little office, and a wonderful guy and a wonderful practice, and he and his wife ran the practice together. And I noticed on the wall by the checkout desk was this little handwritten calligraphy sign that probably they or a family member or something had done that said something like, "A healthy homeopathic practice is always in search of new patients to replace those who've been cured. If you're happy with the services you've received here, please tell your friends," or something like that. And as I sat there, I'm kind of looking at this sign, thinking to myself, this is interesting, because I just spent an hour with this guy, maybe 2 hours with this guy, learning about his practice. He was brilliant at lifestyle medicine. Sports medicine was a strength of his. I mean, he was a person that was not motivated to be a high-end body repair shop. And yet he has this revolving door where people come in, they have problems to solve, symptoms to suppress. He takes a different approach to resolving those problems, and then the moment that they feel better, they unplug, and now the practice is looking for a new patient. And so you have a behavior that is neither in the interest or the desire of the doctor, nor ultimately in the interest of the patient, because when the patient unplugs prematurely like that, they dismiss themselves. Why? Because they don't want to keep paying every time they walk in the door. I mean, nobody wants to sit on the phone with a lawyer for longer than they have to, because the meter's running. And so the fee-for-service model that rewards doing stuff on the part of the doctor, but taxes the patient every time they interact with the practice, I think undermines the relationship that is more optimal. And I think that we'll see an evolution in the relationship between patients and doctors in the third era of medicine. And so the reason that I favor the membership structure is that it's a structure that dictates a different set of behaviors on the part of the practice, but also, more importantly, which is I'm paying a membership fee. I'm making a decision for a period of time, say a year, to engage in this relationship. Most functional medicine providers will tell you that in 3 or definitely 6 months, of working with a patient, that patient is going to feel a lot better than they did when they first walked in the door, with very few exceptions. And so what the membership structure does is by creating an annual, hopefully renewing relationship, it gives that practice the second 6 months without the pressures of money to allow the patient to learn what just happened. How did you restore your health? What are the skills that are required for you to become a good steward of your health going forward? And gain an appreciation for the radically different flavor of medicine that they've just partaken of. And when you do this, and we've noticed this in our own practices last year, we tracked the retention and attrition rates of patients. Instead of this churning revolving door, I think we ran around an 87% retention rate, patients renewing to stay involved in this type of relationship with their doctor. And so I really think that membership structure relieves the money pressure and gives the patient and the doctor time to really embed the relationship and begin to view health as a matter of skill and competence, and begin to view the practice, reframe the medical practice away from this notion of body repair work that's transactional, fee-for-service, and toward a new kind of frame to see the medical relationship in, which is one of teaching and training. And so I think that's a very exciting prospect that is made more possible by a different economic relationship between the patient and the practice.
It's almost like going back to the pre-first era of medicine, where you're doing, you've got to, exactly what you were talking about there, where you've got to go back to the doctor as teacher and the sort of more Hippocratic ideals of medicine.
There's definitely kind of a back to the future element to this, and it just so happens that this future is sort of supercharged, with technology and understanding, and frankly, in this country of all places, we've got every conceivable advantage in terms of access to, not only the emergency medicine that can save our lives when something really does happen, and go wrong, car wrecks, whatever. We've got access to food in relative abundance. We have the knowledge to put all these wonderful resources to work. And in the last step, I think in that equation, it's so ironic that we are as unhealthy as a country, and our health is in the state of decline that it is, given these natural advantages. And I really think that the changes that will kind of unlock our potential as a nation around health have a great deal to do with the structures that we live inside.
Yeah.
Because all the resources are there.
And the structures are what drive the right behavior, and the behavior that we really need to drive is consumers becoming stewards of their own health, and not like the patriarchy of the second or first era. Well, and the patriarchy was required in the first era. If you have an infection, you need someone to come and save you. If you get hit by a bus, you need someone to come and save you, and that person needs to call the shots and make the decisions and fix you up. But that's not what's going to help us to get from this area of chronic disease. And it sounds like this structure encourages that behavior in consumers, which is sort of like the long tail value of what you're creating.
That is exactly right.
I think that's very profound, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come and share that, because I think that we get so focused on changing behavior, but part of this evolution of medicine is understanding that we are evolutionary creatures, and in a certain way we'll respond to our environment. And if our environment dictates that we're starting to learn and understand how to take care of our health, then that's what we'll do. And you've seen that all the way along, like you said earlier, as consumers become payers and for their medicine, they start to act like consumers. Well, what else would you expect? They're just responding to their environment.
Exactly. Structures dictate behavior, and there's nowhere else in American life that I can find where structure has so unfortunately infected our behavior as it has in the area of healthcare, and in our consumer understanding of what health insurance is really all about. It's so funny. Most of us probably listening to this conversation, have got three types of insurance. We have auto insurance, we have homeowners insurance, and we have health insurance. And in two of those three instances, we have a very clear and healthy understanding of what insurance is there to do. With our car, with our house, we have insurance to help us avoid financial ruin in the unlikely event of something. We're paying to manage a risk. Your house burns down. That's bad. The insurance can step in and save you from financial ruin. It's also unlikely. Imagine what your house or your car would look like if you believed that anything my insurance doesn't pay for is unnecessary. I mean, you'd be out of gas, your tires would be flat, you'd have burned up your engine, your gutters would be falling off. I mean, you would have a dilapidated home, a dilapidated car. If you want to see the human equivalent of that belief, just have a look at the declining health of our population.
Or just go to Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. It's crucial. It's not that the insurance is the enemy. The insurance is very necessary in the health domain. I mean, things happen to health that cause financial ruin. Those things do not occur in a primary care setting. Insurance, in my opinion, does not have a constructive role to play. It adds no value in primary care. And so, conditioning the public to believe that, that policymakers and insurance executives are, aligned in their incentives to help you manage and optimize your health is just a foolish misconception. And most people, really thoughtful people, just don't realize that they're abdicating that type of authority to third parties, because they don't understand that the censorship that flows from what is or is not valued and reimbursed by insurance is shocking and appalling. I mean, when you realize the type of technologies that you don't have access to, and the value of the time with your physician that you don't have access to, simply because of the way the incentive system is designed, smart people decide they want to start voting with their own wallets to get what they actually need.
Exactly, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So, if you're a physician, you mentioned just starting with doing some of the training and to understand, just the basics of, say, systems biology, which is really, probably not at the forefront of medical training, just because it's very, very compartmentalized. And certainly, the functional forum, which I put on, one of the things we'll be doing is capturing these thought leaders and putting them in a place where you can watch it online for free, just so that there's no barriers to entry to feel like physicians have to go to a $1,500 seminar to be able to learn anything. And when physicians sit down to look at then the next step, I mean, what options are there for physicians that are stuck in an employed position where there's been a big trend in the last few years for hospitals and other systems to buy these primary care practices to ensure sort of leads into the system. How do you free yourself of the structure that you currently have, apart from just sort of, I guess, quitting? I guess you could quit, but are there other ways to free yourself, or you sort of take baby steps towards operating in this new operating system?
Well, that's actually that's a very good point that you raised, James, because the easier transition is for the doctor that has an existing practice. And the doctor's acquiring this knowledge is finding that he or she is struggling more and more financially just because of the poor design of the incentive system to compensate doctors to do this type of work. And then they evolve their practice. They already have an audience of patients, and the exercise is really one of expressing the new vision of the practice and the companion new financial and economic structure that goes with it, as far as the doctor-patient relationship goes. And you have a wonderful jump start because you've got an existing audience, and this is the type of work that I do. The greater challenge is for that doctor, as you said, who's employed by the hospital or working in a big group, and they really don't own the patient relationships that they have, and they aren't in a place to just sort of flip the switch one day, which is a very brave and scary thing to do. But it's possible to do when you own your own practice or you own those relationships. When you don't, it's tricky. And so the first thing that I always kind of counsel folks to do is you don't own the medical records, you don't own those charts and relationships, but there's nothing that stops these doctors who have acquired this really valuable knowledge from building their own following. So it may not be a patient following, or that following may be a different dimension of the patient relationship. But they start a newsletter, they start a blog, they do speaking in the community, they network with business owners, and because when you do finally take that leap, if you're jumping out of a system that's simply never going to embrace functional and root cause medicine, then a doctor's got to find a pathway into an ability to do that. And so for me, the first logical step in making that a less scary and less risky transition is to begin to do what you can do to create a presence and an audience, so that when you make the change, there are people listening that might even be eagerly anticipating the day when they can access you as a doctor in this new model. So. That I think is probably the first and smartest thing to do for people, because it's terribly difficult to to just start from dead scratch and kind of moonlight and find ways to supplement your income until you have a thriving practice.
I think that's such a smart idea, because one of the things you mentioned earlier is the fact that sooner or later businesses are going to get this, and you're already seeing signs that businesses are going to do it. I can certainly see a time very close in the future where businesses with a certain number of employees might just have an in-house functional medicine doctor, or do group visits for their most at-risk people, or do something that's in-house. Because really, the thing about functional medicine and this type of medicine medicine is it's really low tech. You don't need in order to do the basics of it, the lifestyle management, you just need time with people and be able to talk about risk factors and so forth. You don't really need, a huge hospital of equipment to be able to provide this kind of medicine. So can you see those kind of things happening already where employers are just sort of like bringing it straight into the office?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, if you want to look at macro trends, I mean, worksite clinics among the largest employers in the country, I want to say it's 25% of Fortune 1000 companies have got an on-site clinic. It is a core pillar in the strategy of a self-insured company to really engage the primary care supply, for their, on behalf of their employees. And so, so the most obvious way to do that, if you're a huge company and you've got the resources and the population size to justify it, is to have a clinic on site. Of course, the majority of Americans are employed by small and mid-sized companies, and so the notion of near-site clinics or collaborating physicians makes a great deal more sense. And so this is one of these things that doesn't really require the same burden of proof that it once did. It simply works. And so, so the next question is, and the trend that I think is gonna kind of combine with this one to really create profound opportunities for the doctors or healthcare providers investing their time and energy in learning functional medicine is this trend of challenging the standard of care. So now companies, and again, this will accelerate the rate of innovation and the demands of the marketplace. So companies that have their clinics or their near-site clinics are going to start to say, okay, what is it that could take place in these clinics that would better manage the health of our employees? And what they're discovering is, holy smoke, there is an alternative approach to managing health that actually seems to work a lot better and resonate at such an intuitive level.
Yeah.
And so I think that the growing employer demand for dedicated, protocol-driven, structured relationships with employees is going to be a trend that really, really works in the favor of functional medicine providers. And the cool thing is that for privacy reasons, at the human resources level, companies don't actually want to own these clinics. And so it also feeds and supports the notion of the independent physician. Because this is a relationship that actually, from a corporate perspective, doesn't completely require, but really encourages outsourcing to a partner rather than ownership and employment of the doctor.
That's exciting. I didn't really think about that, but certainly that plays into it, because I think what physicians really want, they want to do great medicine, they want to help people, and they want to be able to control their own destiny. And it seems like you can really tick all of those boxes with this kind of strategy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, Tom, it's been such a pleasure to have you here today, and I think all of your insight to physicians and to, if you're a business or if you're a government or anyone that's listened to this, will hopefully just sort of wake up to the fact that this is happening, it's not going away, there's serious value to be created from this, and I think this is really what's going to, accelerate this whole thing. So, every person that I'm going to have in the summit, I'm asking them at the end to give their own sort of, when I say the words, what's the visceral feeling that you have when I say the words, the evolution of medicine?
Well, I mean, the two things that come immediately to my mind are, the technological evolution, ranging from, the explosion of wearables and monitoring technologies to the explosion of new and powerful biomarkers, to the technology that is functional medicine, and then the evolution of the structures that dictate our behavior inside that system, and I think both are absolutely in a state of flux and moving in the right direction as we speak.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on here at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. Tom, if people want to find out more about your work, where's the best place for them to look you up?
Oh, the easiest place would be oneself.com. The letter N, the number one, as in the statistical N of one, health.com.
That's great. Well, this has been Tom Blue. He's the Chief Strategy Officer of the American Association of Private Physicians. This is the Evolution of Medicine Summit. And thank you so much for listening. I hope this was as inspiring to you as it has been to me and as it was to me today. And thanks everyone for your time and attention. Thanks, Tom, for being on. And we'll see you next time.